Certainly. Here are some interesting facts about the Nile River. Longest river. The Nile River is often regarded as the longest river in the world, stretching over 6,650 kilometers, 4,130 miles, from its farthest source in Burundi to its delta in Egypt, where it flows into the Mediterranean Sea. Historical importance. The Nile has been essential to the development of ancient Egyptian civilization, providing water for irrigation, transportation, and agriculture. The river was central to the economy, culture, and religion of ancient Egypt. Blue Nile and White Nile. The Nile has two main tributaries, the Blue Nile, which originates in Ethiopia and is the source of most of the Nile's water and sediment, and the White Nile, which begins in Lake Victoria in Uganda. Annual flooding. The Nile River has a predictable annual flooding cycle caused by heavy rains in the Ethiopian highlands. This flooding deposited nutrient-rich silt onto the surrounding floodplains, making the land fertile for agriculture. Aswan Dam. In the 20th century, the construction of the Aswan Dam in Egypt helped regulate the flow of the Nile, control flooding, and provide hydroelectric power. However, it also had significant environmental and social impacts on the region. Biodiversity. The Nile River supports a diverse range of plant and animal species, including the Nile crocodile, hippopotamus, and various species of fish. It also serves as an important migratory route for birds. Modern importance. Today, the Nile remains crucial to the economies of the countries through which it flows, providing water for agriculture, industry, and domestic use. However, increasing population pressures, pollution, and climate change pose significant challenges to its sustainability. These are just a few highlights of the Nile River's significance and importance throughout history and in the present day.
The Nile River has been a source of contention and conflict among the countries through which it flows, primarily Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. Here are some key points regarding battles and disputes over the Nile, historical conflicts. Throughout history, various kingdoms and empires in the Nile basin vied for control over the river and its resources. These conflicts often revolved around access to water for agriculture, transportation, and trade. Colonial influence. During the colonial era, European powers, particularly Britain, sought to control the Nile and its tributaries as part of their imperial ambitions in Africa. Treaties and agreements were imposed that favored colonial interests and often ignored the needs and rights of the indigenous populations. Nile Waters Treaty. In 1929, a treaty was signed between Britain on behalf of its colonies and Egypt, known as the Nile Waters Treaty. This treaty allocated the majority of the Nile's waters to Egypt, with a smaller share allocated to Sudan, while disregarding the interests of upstream countries like Ethiopia. Modern disputes. In recent years, the construction of large-scale dams and irrigation projects by upstream countries, particularly Ethiopia with its Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam Gird, has heightened tensions over the Nile. Egypt and Sudan have expressed concerns about the potential impact of these projects on their water, supply and agriculture, negotiations and diplomacy. Efforts have been made to address these disputes through negotiations and diplomatic channels. The Nile Basin Initiative, established in 1999, aims to promote cooperation and sustainable development in the Nile Basin region. However, reaching consensus among the riparian states has proven challenging, particularly regarding the equitable sharing of the Nile's waters. International involvement. International actors, including the United Nations, the African Union, and other regional organizations, have been involved in mediating negotiations and facilitating agreements among the Nile Basin countries. However, finding a mutually acceptable solution remains an ongoing process fraught with complexities and geopolitical interests. Overall, battles over the Nile have been driven by the fundamental need for water resources and the historic, political, and economic dynamics within the Nile Basin region. Resolving these conflicts requires balancing the interests and rights of all riparian states, while ensuring sustainable management of the Nile's waters for future generations.
Several significant projects have been built on the Nile River and its tributaries over the years, aimed at harnessing its water resources for various purposes. Here are some notable examples. Aswan Dam, Egypt, one of the most famous projects on the Nile. The Aswan Dam was completed in 1970. It regulates the flow of the Nile, controls flooding, and provides hydroelectric power generation. The reservoir formed by the dam, Lake Nasser, is one of the world's largest artificial lakes and provides water for irrigation and domestic use. Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Ethiopia, currently under construction on the Blue Nile. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam GERD is one of Africa's largest infrastructure projects. It aims to generate hydroelectric power for Ethiopia's growing economy. However, the dam has sparked tensions with downstream countries like Egypt and Sudan over water security and resource management. Jebel Aulia Dam, Sudan, located on the White Nile. The Jebel Aulia Dam is one of Sudan's major hydroelectric power plants. It regulates water flow and provides electricity for the country's infrastructure and development. Owen Falls Dam, Uganda, also known as the Nile Power Station. The Owen Falls Dam is situated on the White Nile near Jinja, Uganda. It is a significant source of hydroelectric power for Uganda and neighboring countries. Sena Dam, Sudan, constructed on the Blue Nile. The Sena Dam provides irrigation water for agriculture and helps regulate the river's flow. It contributes to Sudan's agricultural productivity and economic development. Roseas Dam, Sudan, another dam on the Blue Nile. The Roseas Dam is one of Sudan's major hydroelectric power plants. It generates electricity and supports irrigation schemes in the region. Rusumo Falls Hydroelectric Project, Rwanda, Tanzania, Burundi. This project involves the construction of a dam on the Kagera River, a tributary of the Nile. It aims to generate hydroelectric power for Rwanda, Tanzania, and Burundi, contributing to regional energy security and economic development. These are just a few examples of the many projects built on the Nile River and its tributaries, demonstrating the importance of water resources for the socio-economic development of the region. However, the construction and management of such projects often involve complex political, environmental, and social considerations, requiring careful planning and cooperation among the riparian states.